Hello, and welcome to the last panel of the day, which is where do I go from here, taking the first steps to your future. And so, the purpose of this panel is you all have heard a lot of information. We had some amazing speakers who were dropping some amazing gems. And we wanted to use this last panel to really help you think about what now, right? Where are the next steps? What should I be thinking about? How do you make this just not just a panel that you attended on Friday, right? Something that you sat in on, but something that you actually, use to move you from aspiration to actually taking meaningful action. So, that being said, we're going to have some conversation here, answer a bunch of questions. And at the end, we want you all to be prepared with thinking about what is the one action that you are going to do over the next week following this summit, and one person that you're going to tell to hold you accountable to doing this thing. So I'm planting the seed now because at the end of this thing, I'm going to ask you all again and have you type that into the chat. But again, the purpose is for you all to actually take this and do something with, because that's the point of this summit. So I want to introduce you all have met me, Ruby Maddox, and you've met LeVar, my co-founder LeVar Thomas. But I want you to meet our speaker, Jerry the Third. So if there's one word that best describes Jerry Thompson the Third, is that he's an adventurer. And also, I have to say that Jerry has come and spoken to our LFW students a couple times and is an amazing speaker. And Jerry has also spent the last decade plunging across borders of art, culture, and business to evolve his understanding of the world from theory to practice. As a Simon Sinek master trainer for the Optimism Company, Jerry excels in captivating audiences through levity, logic, and radiant storytelling. He repositions even the densest of subjects to serve listeners and invites you to take the next step towards a more inspired tomorrow. Jerry, over to
Thank
you.
you, Ruby. I appreciate it. And thank you, LeVar. I'm excited to be here. It's been inspiring just listening. I've been here since the first session. And so this is, as you all know, and I see some alums from Leaders of the Free World. Happy to see y'all out here. But this is really exactly my alley because travel and global leadership opportunities have just changed my world fundamentally. So anything that I can contribute for your journey, that's what I'm here for. So thanks for the space.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm going to kick it off with asking both of you a couple questions. And what was your global career journey like? LeVar, I know you mentioned a couple things in some of the earlier sessions, but how did you get to this point?
Wow. I mean, the journey started back in high school. I was a sophomore and I learned about the Key Club program where there was a math professor teacher who was taking students abroad for a number of years. And that year he was taking students to Spain. So growing up in a Caribbean household, I'm like, that sounds pretty dope. Let me tell my family and see if they would support it. And my dad was like, cool, that sounds interesting. And everyone was like, hey, you should go and take advantage of it. Then my third year in high school, I went to Italy, and in my senior, I went to France. So at that point in time, I didn't really understand the importance of international experiences because I was young. It was just like a cool experience. But looking back, I'm like, wow, those international experiences as a young brother growing up in Brooklyn, New York, was planting seeds of expanding my worldview, right? Getting me to see that the world was much bigger than Brooklyn. It was much bigger than my neighborhood. And just me having those experiences literally opened the next door for international exposure. So when I started at community college right after high school, there was a program that was taking students to Austria. So for me, I'm like, I already had a track record of taking advantage of traveling. So I wasn't afraid to apply. And then I went to Austria for a week and we stayed in the castle where they filmed The Sound of Music. And it was such a dope experience. And it literally just opened my eyes to, you know, wanting to continue that path of gaining international experiences, but also the development that was happening within me. I was starting to think differently. I was starting to speak differently. I was starting to enter different spaces because of that awareness. So when that was time for me to graduate from Clark University and I learned about the Peace Corps, it was like I've had this track record of taking advantage of opportunities and not shying away from the discomfort. So for me, it was that initial seed of being afraid and doing it anyway to seeking the thrill of experiences that forced me out of my comfort zone. So, in terms of my global leadership career, what the Peace Corps did for me, and those are all short-term experiences. So that allowed me to be able to live abroad for 2 years in Rwanda and learning the language and trying to identify my new, like who I was in that space and doing healthcare work. So my journey started off as a high school student, but I think just it just opened the door for me to see that, wow, this thing is possible. I can own a passport, and now I can be able to create an opportunity along with Ruby to provide other young Black men with opportunities to travel with them.
Awesome, awesome. I love that response. I love how it's people always think that going abroad has to be this big long thing, and that like for you it was these small trips that led to making the bigger decision of doing it long term. How about you, Jerry?
Mine has been a patchwork, and I respect and recognize folks with more structure in their event. What's funny is we've gotten to see a lot of people in roles that maybe you never knew existed before today. In some way, I've been a part of all of them. So my first job out of college, I worked for a French company named Michelin. They make the tires. They actually bought me my first passport. Never had one before then, and sent me abroad. I loved the experience so much that I asked if I could have an assignment out there. They said no. I said, okay, will you teach me French? We have a French school in my building. They also said no. And so I put a plan together, bought a one-way ticket, quit my job, and flew out to Paris, France at about 24. And ever since then, the idea of having a global career has been just intertwined into my life. Within a month of landing in Paris with no job, nothing set up, I got reached out to by a musician. I'm also a professional musician. And I got my first opportunity to work with the US Department of State in Botswana doing kind of like cultural ambassadorship. Since then, I've been on 8 different trips over the past decade, excluding COVID. I've been global, and that experience has really fueled all of my ideas. It just had me think broader. Upon returning to the States, I started a podcast collecting stories from amazing Black men like you've heard from today, including some that you've heard from like LeVar, Lordell, and others. And so I started cultivating community, which then broadened my circle again. And then even as things locked down with COVID, I helped Airbnb launch their online global experiences program. So I was one of 50 instructors, and now I'm teaching people from all over the world how to start podcasts. Even in my current job, I travel a lot. Spent the past year in Mexico just eating tacos and figuring life out. So my career has been impacted by travel, but for sure, travel has helped bolster me in all these different spaces where I still show up to connect people and serve and help us be, slightly better versions of ourselves today than we were yesterday.
That's awesome, awesome. And thank you for that. And I love that. It's just so, like you said, it's Patrick put together, but it's just like it was carving your own path and making your own narrative that helped push that forward. And so for both of you, like in dealing with, family dynamics within that, because we know that that's a big thing. When we go abroad, I know for me, when I mean, I was 30 when I was first going abroad, and my mom was not happy with that decision. Like, and I'm like, I'm grown, right? But not really in her eyes. But so for your families, how did they deal with you all, going forward in this way and making these decisions that would put you outside the country for long periods of time?
Yeah. So initially, I think in high school, it was easy. I'm the youngest of 3. I have 2 siblings. They're both 10 and 11 years older than me. So as the young one, they were like, have opportunities, get exposure. I think it was interesting when I made the decision to leave my job at the State House to go to the Peace Corps. I remember my dad was like, why do you want to like volunteer abroad? Like he couldn't understand the concept, like supposed to be making money and I was on the track of going to law school and things like that. But for me, I had to learn that not everyone will understand your journey, right? I had to get away from the fact that like I'm on this different path. I'm traveling. I'm speaking. I'm having these different experiences that's kind of changing me in different ways. And I was expecting my family to understand initially, and I'm like, they're not going to get it. When I got back from Rwanda, and Ruby and I connected, and we started really building the program together. And I think it was one year I was flying to Ghana. He's like, "Oh, where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going to Ghana to, build out this program." And he's like, "Wow!" Like, I think it was like a flashback. Like he couldn't see this, right? But he just knew that it was something driving me to go. And I think at the end of the day, he's like, "Wow, like I'm extremely proud of you," because it's like he didn't see the picture, but I stuck to whatever was driving me. I stuck to that sense of purpose I was feeling to pursue international experiences and to do it in a way that would make it inclusive for everyone else that was coming behind me. And I think one time he said, Africa is doing really good to you. He's doing really good to you. And I look back and I'm proud of that. And I think, for folks listening, not everyone will understand your journey and your path. And it's not up to them to understand. It's for them to experience the purpose. So yeah, turn it over to you, Jerry.
It's funny you mentioned your pops having some resistance, because that was my earliest form of resistance early on. And mind you, I told my dad, "Yo, I already bought this plane ticket. I'm quitting my job." I remember within my last day, I'm on the phone with him, and he's like, "You're doing what again?" And I'm like, "Hold up, Doc. Like, we've been talking about this for 6 months." And what I've learned over the years, because it's been almost 10 years since I first kind of left the country without a plan, is that your parents are kind of used to any resistance is out of love. It comes from a good place. What parents wouldn't want to feel like they had more security and knowledge of the well-being of their children? Both me and my sister live abroad right now. That's not what anybody prepared them for. So I definitely had some moments of resistance, but in general, my family has been supportive, even the fact that they just let me do my thing. There's a lot of trust in my autonomy there. But my sisters, who actually become a huge factor into the way I've traveled, it's funny to see my experiences evolve and kind of disseminate throughout the rest of the people that I know. So my sister came to visit me in Paris in like 2015. We spent Christmas and New Year's together. She had never been outside the country, but it was important for me that she had me there to kind of show her around. I was a tour guide at the time. I was dating a girl. There's all kinds of things. It was a good vibe. But come to find out, a few years later, she's working abroad for Uber. And now she just finished her master's degree in London. Then I got to share that moment with my dad and my sister abroad. And now my dad lives in Puerto Rico. And we had a conversation where I was like, "Dude, I'm excited that this hypes you up, because this is my life. So maybe we have a little bit more in common than I thought. And I'm glad that you're getting similar benefits out of it." So it's kind of come full circle, even though there've been moments of resistance. But I think a lot of that is natural. The world can seem a lot scary than it really is. And people just want the best for you. So definitely had those struggles here and there.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Thank you both. And so it was mentioned earlier, I think it was Patrick, I'm not even gonna try to guess, but talking about when we talk about the first steps to going abroad, to having, a global leadership career, or doing any of this stuff, that it starts in the mind, right? It's about the mindset, and how even taking the first step, can be a little bit scary. Money becomes the easiest excuse, right? Oh, it's too expensive. We can stop there, right? But it's the unknown. I've got to, the red tape may be involved in getting your first visa, and all of that sort of stuff. And my question is, what is the necessary mindset that you feel folks need to have, and starting to even think about, before you buy that one-way ticket, before you jump on top of that opportunity that comes across, what is that mindset that you need to have?
I would say that, like, it's just understanding that growth cannot happen within your comfort zone. Like, we talk about growth, right? We talk about breakthrough. I'm a self-help junkie, right? So I have a bunch of books in my library that kind of speaks to success overall, but there's a process. We all have our own process. My process looks different from Jerry's process, from Ruby's process. It's all things we need to learn and unlearn for us to get to a better version of ourselves. And I think once we understand that basic foundational principle, then we can begin pursuing opportunities that allow us to overcome fear or the resistance. Because no matter what opportunity you pursue, like for example, like even when I went to Rwanda, I found myself trying to recreate the same comfort zone luxuries that I had back in New York. And I heard someone mention that earlier in the panel, like we try to bring our comfort zone with us everywhere we go. But what if it's sabotaging the very person that you're trying to become? Right? You don't pursue new opportunities to remain the same person. You pursue new opportunities so you can grow. So that mindset alone was, I'm like, if I want to grow, I need to be stretched, and I can't be stretched doing the same thing. So for me, that's kind of the mindset I had to start out with.
Awesome. Cherry?
Bars right there, y'all. I hope y'all capturing these gems. On a similar vein, yeah, the growth part is huge. I think what I've learned though over time is while I'm fascinated with travel and what it's afforded me, it doesn't always mean the same thing to everybody. And so if you're interested in pursuing any path that's different, for sure there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be uncertainty, but I think the helpful mindset for most applications is I'm unsure, but I'm open. I'm unsure, but I'm curious because frankly the paths that we've been on have uncertainty on them as well, but if you can maintain just that little bit of openness to be aware and present for what actually is for you in that experience, you might travel halfway across the world, 12-hour flight to Thailand, and it doesn't shift you, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that travel is useless or you didn't have a powerful moment, but it just means you leaned in, and maybe it didn't offer the value it did somebody else. But that kind of perspective gives me an opportunity to get the most out of whatever I'm doing, still acknowledging that, like, hey, this also might not be for me, but if it is, I want to make sure I capture as much as I can.
Awesome, awesome. LeVar, you mentioned being a self-help junkie, and so asking both of you, what would you recommend in terms of resources that help reinforce that mindset of being open, of being uncomfortable, of focusing on growth?
For me, I mean, I read a lot of Miles Monroe, but he has a book called Understanding Your Potential, and it really changed the trajectory of my life because it helped me to realize that my purpose was not defined by the opinions or perspectives of others. Like I had to break free from that mindset of, you know, your opinion mattered so much to my self-esteem, but it's called self-esteem for a reason, right? Not external esteem, right? So I had to learn how to empower myself, um, and through my faith in God and my purpose, kind of being affirmed in that. So I think that book on understanding potential was powerful in terms of just rethinking purpose and rethinking impact.
Could you repeat the question again, Ruby? I don't get to sit with LeVar on many panels. I'm over here just like, yo. What was the question again, Ruby?
The question was any resources that you could recommend on keeping your mindset strong or keeping your mindset open for growth.
Yeah, I think one of the things you can do is find models of success. And we're looking for models, I'll be clear, models of success of outcome, not situation or circumstance. Like, how did someone start in a similar zone as me and then get the outcome that I'm looking for? And when I was traveling out in 2014, the Black travel movement, I have a lot of friends in that. It wasn't as big as it is today. I wasn't as aware of, previous Black male adventurers and explorers. I had to learn all that history. But what really helped me was having a conversation with someone I didn't even need to know. It's just the fact that I was going to be in Paris and they looked like me. And what that helped me do was at least tap into something tangible. I said, this is real. This is working out for this person. And maybe I can understand some of the nuances that would allow me to have this lived experience. Because it's one thing for your role models and heroes to say they've traveled, but we don't always see as much of ourselves in those aspirational figures as we'd like. So if you see somebody putting out their contact information, LinkedIn, just get a glimpse of their story. I promise it's going to help strengthen you to keep that openness to the process going, because it might not always be comfortable or easy.
Awesome. Thank you. So, given everything that was said today and different panels and things like that, what are the global career strategies that you would recommend to attendees?
Google is one hell of a system. There's so much information out there, but I think to like Jerry's earlier point, sometimes we get so bombarded with so many different opportunities. Just pick one and learn about it, right? Just taking action on one is better than having interest in 1,000 different things that you never take action on. So if it's Peace Corps, if it's Fulbright, if it's Wrangle, um, if it's study abroad, maybe it's just saying, you know what, I'm going to schedule a meeting with my study abroad advisor and just learn about what opportunities are available, right? What are the post graduation opportunities available to me? And say, oh, if you're interested in Peace Corps, Niasa mentioned there's a number of recruiters. Reach out to a recruiter in your area. Type in your zip code, someone pops up, and you can have a 15-minute coffee time with them and learn about different opportunities available to you. So I think it sometimes we make these opportunities seem so colossal. It's really just identifying whether these career opportunities align with your journey, your goals. If you want to live abroad and learn a language, look at Fulbright, look at a Peace Corps. Jerry has a number of other opportunities that he's done that he can share if you want to go a non-conventional route. So I think it's being informed, but also taking action and reaching out to folks that are in these spaces.
I love that, LeVar. Career strategies that helped me the most were really just an awareness that these things even existed. One of my criteria when I was leaving college was that I would only work for a multinational company because I knew that there was a possibility I could get a transfer or get an assignment. So some of that is just being open to that being a possibility for you. And the funny thing about folks that look like us who travel abroad is we don't be here. So sometimes it's very hard to have a scene. But if you start following these breadcrumbs, following these trails, getting into people's stories, when you do find us, we stand out immensely. So there's kind of like this interesting parallel to what's going on. But know that people have been adventuring. Black people that look just like you have been successfully traveling the world, even when it was way difficult, before cell phones, before the teleconference capabilities. And now is the moment to really leverage that. There was a point in time where the most common, and I still get this, where people assume I'm in the military. And people like me and LeVar are seriously like standing on the shoulders of giants because that level of sacrifice or commitment to a different organization isn't required for us to kind of experience the world more freely. So there's probably someone who's accomplished whatever you have in your mind. And now it's on you to do a little bit of that due diligence and find out who they are and learn from their story because it can very quickly become yours.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, both of you. Any books, podcast, or research you would recommend that would that help in building a global leadership career or thinking about a career that's beyond borders?
I mean, I will point out Jerry's podcast. Point Noah, man, look, this brother has interviewed all of the game changers that's into the international global space, and I think it's powerful. So he has a lot of great interviews on his podcast. One of the books for me that was game changing was also The Alchemist. I don't know how many of y'all on here read The Alchemist, but it was game changing because it shows you how you can really take who you are and opportunities and really create something new out of it. Taking circumstances and changing it into a different form that allows you to be elevated. So I would definitely say that. Another book that I recommend is Think and Grow Rich, The Black Choice by Dennis Kimbro. If you talk about mindset, I think that's a really good resource.
I'm a huge fan of The Alchemist, bar none. Even if you love reading nonfiction like I do, that was a book I read really early on that changed just what I was open to. So it's really great adventure story that you can get some good life lessons out of. Another book is The Little Prince, if you're not hip to that. And these are sometimes like children's books, but it keeps your mind open. And then I'll have to shout out to my podcast as well. So at the moment, I have a collection, the largest collection of travel stories told from the perspective of Black men. We have over 75 stories, 75 different men included. We've sponsored 18 passports to date. It's really my passion project. We're on hiatus right now, but maybe some of you become guests in the future. But I created that resource because I didn't have the catalog of people that looked like me talking about these stories. And so the diversity of perspectives, experiences, travels, it's something to encourage and see yourself in, because it's unscripted. We don't have any planned questions. It's just straight talk. And sometimes it's nice to hear that somebody was nervous or uncomfortable or missed their family or had the time of their life jumping off a cliff. We need that diversity of perspective because we're diverse individuals. We all might look similarly, but there are things out in the world for each of us. And so there's a lot of world out there for you, but there's a lot of you out there in the world. And there's a version of yourself that you'll only access by taking the leap, building a strategy to get abroad. And you might be surprised at the version of yourself that meets you on the other side.
That's awesome. So before I ask the last question, I did want to open it up to the audience to see if there were any questions that you all might have. So feel free to type into the chat and you'll see it come up on the screen. But questions that you would want to ask in terms of thinking about your own next steps. What advice would these guys have for you? Burning questions that you may have been holding all day in terms of how do you get started in building a global leadership career, even if you don't necessarily know exactly where you want to land.
Can I add one thing in there, Ruby, while people are typing? One thing that's really useful as you have these experiences and even as you think about them is just understanding, getting appreciation for how many skills adventuring or traveling will build into your leadership. It's fundamentally you're dealing with adversity. And even on a global scale, we live in a global economy, a global world, different cultures, different languages. Just you being able to navigate successfully a trip abroad. Mind you, most of you are all US citizens. Half of your country doesn't even have a passport. So what happens is as you kind of step out into these further tiers, you realize you become exceptionally qualified to do very unique and impactful work just because you've demonstrated your ability to navigate adversity, deal with challenges, and communicate more effectively. So there's some really strong positives that sometimes we don't talk to enough of what it takes to actually come back with a trip and still have your head on in one piece. So keep that in mind as you think of what lies before you.
So we do have one question that's going to go up on the screen. How would you all describe your global mindset?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So the global mindset is one very powerful for understanding that while we're all different, we're all interconnected. And if you can sometimes give yourself enough space to truly understand someone, you realize there's people kind of all want the same sort of thing. So traveling around the world and being able to see a community in the desert of Botswana, see another community in Paris, France, see another community in San Diego, you understand that people kind of want the same stuff. They want to feel good. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel safe and secure. And all the culture is everything in between that's different between your experience and theirs. So it's very useful for seeing us all in one connected ecosystem, even when those connections aren't obvious. And sometimes that allows me the chance to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, to be a little bit more patient, to be a little bit more restrained so I can apply wisdom before knowledge sometimes.
Awesome.
Absolutely. To add to that, I would say just being able to navigate cultural differences. It's being able to be empathetic towards other cultures and realize that while there may be differences between your culture and another person's, that there's still commonality, as Jeremy mentioned, and being able to just see the world bigger than your own space. I think that's the key thing because it humbles you when you realize how much you don't know and how much you have to unlearn just so you can kind of be more well-rounded in your perspective. So for me, it's that curiosity of learning curiosity of unlearning, and being able to bridge the gap.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks. Do we have any other questions? Cool.
Great question, by the way.
Yeah. So, what would you all and not right. So, what would you all recommend as being the first step, and taking that journey? Because remember, to ask the audience, like y'all should be thinking about what your first steps are going to be. Because I want y'all to pop it into the chat after. But what would you all recommend as first steps in taking your global leadership career?
I I would say taking a step back, right? Like, so after the after the summit, we said a lot of things. They heard a lot. Taking a step back and really evaluating the patterns of their experiences. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes we feel like our experiences or our setbacks or our failures aren't good enough or don't qualify us for a lot of cool stuff. And those very things are ingredients to help them advance in their life and their careers. But sometimes our perspective and our mindset tells us that we somehow have to correct these bad areas and these negative things for us to qualify for rooms that we want to be a part of. And when I say step back, it's like really look at the different experiences you've had over the past 5 years, 10 years. What are the patterns you're seeing? What are the areas you're gravitating towards? What are the skill sets that you see that it's showing them? Maybe you're communicating in certain spaces, or maybe you think critical in these spaces, or maybe you have a way of jumping into problems and thinking strategically. What are those patterns that you're noticing? And get clear about it and write those things down. Because as you now pursue opportunities, you want to align what you're pursuing with the patterns you've been able to identify with those skill sets, right? And I think that can help you catapult your career and opportunity that you're a part of, because now you're operating in the realm of your gifts and your abilities and your strengths, and you're not doing guesswork anymore. So I would say start right there, because it's so easy to apply to a lot of things and you still don't know yourself. So start there and then do everything else I said about, scheduling that meeting and doing your research. So I say that.
Awesome, awesome. Jerry?
I love that. These are bars. I'm over here. I'm really taking it in, bro. I know it's kind of buttered on my side of the bread already, but your suggestion of one action and one piece of accountability, I think is really potent. And here's the thing. If you want to do things that are different than what you've seen your whole life, what you're exposed to, that are just against the norm, you're going to need that ability to be sensitive to your own curiosities, your own interest, and develop what's kind of a skill to honor that sort of stuff. I move in ways that are completely unconventional to others, but it's because I'm honed in on what works for me. So it doesn't need to make sense to them. You need to be able to develop that and hear that inner voice or intuition sometimes. But then you're also going to need community. The only reason that I can sell all my stuff and take a one-way ticket is because I know I have just a couple people who can keep me feeling psychologically safe, whether they've had my particular experience, but just someone to listen to. So if you start building that in pairs, your ambition and then someone that can support it, you'll find that you'll be able to always be tapped into the resources that can help you solve your own problems, but you're always being led by your own voice, your own calling. So it seems like a simple exercise, but it's actually building the framework for you to be able to surmount any obstacles as you progress along this journey or many other.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you both for that. And so we did have some other questions right before we asked you all to be thinking about what your one thing and one person is going to be. Would you encourage others who are considering study abroad to get involved in international affairs? There are many ways to do this.
Go ahead, Jerry.
If you want to be in international affairs, yeah, go for it. And similar to any career choice, just have a strong reason. There's spaces where we need our voices. I've been on 8 different tours with the U.S. Embassy and Department of State. So shout out Department of State, folks. And part of the reason that my band got picked is because we brought a particular Black American voice to these spaces, and people needed to see that, an understanding of context. There's definitely a lot of your experience you can trade for in those spaces. I cannot speak to working for the government, but so find some people and ask them some real questions. Everyone that I've met in these spaces has been very open because they know recruitment is hard for anybody. Like, these are just very different sorts of roles and responsibilities. So if the excitement, the opportunity to maybe move around every couple of years, to be posted in some very out of the way places and just have this rich environment for learning and doing good work, that's great. But yeah, if it's not for you, there are other things you can do with international experience as well.
Absolutely. I think studying abroad is the, the seed that can help provide perspective on whether you would want to pursue a career in international affairs. Like I did Peace Corps, and that was like my governmental international experience, and it gave me a lot of perspective um, to on the world in terms of how government works overseas, in terms of international development, and what does that mean. So just having exposure to opportunities can help you figure out whether it's something that you want to do or not. My thing is try, you know, expose yourself to it, and it can help provide clarity around that.
Awesome. So one last and brief question before we sort of like turn it over and have people, say what they're going to do when they leave. Someone you all had mentioned earlier, this is a second question for Eugene. You all had mentioned earlier things that you had to unlearn and as part of your journey. And the question is, what is the biggest lesson you've had to unlearn in doing this? It's a good question.
I'll rock with it. A lot. There have been a lot of personal learnings, but in terms of how I show up in spaces and spaces like this specifically, I've learned to be more gentle with my people ever since I headed out to Paris. And every day that feeling grows. I had to recognize that my experience with people who look like me was defined by a context that I had no control over. And so I remember my first moment in Botswana where one of the aunties walking down the street yelled at me and said Swana because I was so casual and I blended in. And I was like, okay, wow, this is something I've never experienced before. To that same point, when I saw Black people in Paris, I had to realize that I'm not in inner city Chicago or Philadelphia. So, you know what? Let me find an opportunity to sit next to a brother on the train just so I can decolonize my perspective of people that look like me. And that's been incredibly impactful because we have narratives about it ourselves that aren't always positive. So the chance to embrace in low stakes environment, my own likeness has been incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's powerful, brother. For me, I would say unlearning this idea that I wasn't enough. This constant feeling of like never being good enough or never being qualified for spaces, and um, feeling I needed external validation, and I had to I had to hit a reset, a mental reset, a mental, spiritual, emotional reset on that diminishing feeling of feeling like I have to kind of cover up myself, or take my things off at the door, or put things on just so I can show up in the room. And it's freeing and liberating when you can show up as your authentic self and love yourself and affirm yourself and tell yourself that you are enough and that there's nothing else that you need to validate you, because you just being you is enough. And the moment that I understood that, I think it allowed me to show up in spaces a lot differently. It allowed me to show up more authentically, and it freed other people in the room who thought they weren't enough to feel enough. So I would say unlearning that.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you both. So we are going to close with the question that I put out there to folks, and you'll see it down there at the bottom of the screen, y'all, if you don't remember it. But what's one thing that you're going to do after the summit? one action that you're going to take, something that you heard today, throw it out there. And also, what's one person that you will tell who's going to hold you accountable? Because sometimes it can just be that one person asking you, so how's that thing going? You know, that raises it from being just in your head. Because this is in your head, it can stay there for a few months, 6 months, and no one knows that you're working on that thing or that you had aspirations of a thing. So thinking about the one thing that you're going to do, it could be applying for a passport if you don't have one. It could be making an appointment to talk to a study abroad office. It could be, like LeVar said, doing an assessment of what are some of the things that I've done so far and how might this influence what I do next. So one thing that you'll do after the summit and one person that you'll tell to keep you accountable. You can go ahead and just type that into the chat. And maybe it might inspire somebody else who's thinking about what action should I take.
And Ruby, if you don't mind, it can be mad small. It could be just looking up what is the actual primary language of Taiwan. Just something that gets you one step closer, because it's about the practice. So you don't gotta buy a one-way ticket today. You don't have to do it the way I've done it. You just, there's a site called Numio a lot of people don't know about. They want to know how much does it cost to live in Mexico City. It's in the internet. Have you asked Mr. Google?
And it could also just be getting the idea out of their head and on the paper. It's a wish. It's in your mind. It becomes a goal when it's on paper.
Yeah. Any other answers? Cool. Cool. So if there's one takeaway I want you all to think about or continue to think about, is that 4 steps, right? 4 things to keep in mind as you're moving all of these things forward, as you're taking in what you've learned, as you're turning those things from things that you're thinking about to things that you're actually doing, is remember to keep thinking about your purpose. Why does this matter to me? Why is this important to me? What am I going to get out of this, or what can I contribute to this? I want you to think about, the vision that you want to create for yourself and for your life. You've heard a lot of things here. Jerry pointed out, thinking about others who are doing it and what you see yourself doing, the outcomes. Think about the plan that you have and knowing and being clear about where you want to go, starting to put that together. And lastly, execute on those things. And so, find your purpose, get clear about your vision, build a plan for what you're going to do. You've heard a lot of things, a lot of steps that you can take. But most importantly, execute on those things and hold yourself accountable to making that happen. So we want to thank you so much. Jerry, thank you for being here. I want to thank the audience for being not only at this panel, but also being a part of the summit today. This took a lot of folks, and so we're going to close it out. Again, Jerry, thank you. And LeVar and I are just going to say, just like we can't say thank you enough, right? We want to tell you all that after the summit, there's going to be an email that goes out. It's going to have a link to a survey. We want you to tell us about what your experience was, what you thought, things that we might improve on for next year. We also will be keeping the networking rooms open for another hour. So that's a space that you can go into and continue to connect with other folks. Just do it. And LeVar?
Wow, I'm just so overwhelmed with insight and information. Today was truly a blessing. I want to thank everyone for staying present, staying engaged. It's not easy to change your life, and it's not easy to write a narrative of what's possible. So we want to just thank you all for being a part of that. This summit was a part of our global leadership pipeline initiative that we're really trying to get more young Black men into international experiences. So if you would like to bring this or have your institution be a part of the work that we're doing, please stay connected. As Ruby mentioned, it's going to be a lot of follow-up information and resources and tools to be a part of this important work. I'm just so grateful. It's an honor to be a part of this work in this space and to hear the stories. Had 100% of They would live abroad. So that's awesome, Marie.
Yeah. And also just to clarify, the first email you all will get from us will just kind of be a recap, some of the videos and the sessions today, and then the second email that you'll get from us will be the links and resources and things like that for all the attendees. So yeah, so thank you, and thank you, Mr. Thomas, for for being my co-founder in this work. And so yeah.
Thank you. It's only the beginning. So stay tuned, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Have a good weekend.
Yes. And happy Black History Month.
And happy Black History Month.